Hello and welcome. I am Tufik Hakim, Executive Director of the Foundation for Self-Leadership. On behalf of the Foundation's board and associates, I thank you for joining us on this first forum on taking self to school. We are hosting this series of conversations because, like you, we recognize that emotional discovery and attunement are critical elements of self-development. As such, we advocate for emotional learning to be an important complement of academic development in our schools. To state the obvious, we are living today at a time of increased societal tension, as affirmed by the latest Global Emotions poll. In fact, the 2017 American Psychological Association survey indicated that most adults in the US, 60%, are experiencing a great deal of worry about money, about work, about the future, which are triggering significantly uneasy feelings of anger, anxiety, and fear. This is bound to affect students' thoughts and behaviors and the overall school climate, not to mention anything about the rising pressures that teachers at the schools are experiencing daily, as illustrated by this week's cover story of Times Magazine. It is then within this context that we are facilitating these conversations so we can explore together the needs of school students and teachers, and so that we can examine together how we might, through IFS as a paradigm, as a lens, as a language, assist students and teachers to achieve a state of calm and build resilience in the face of adversity. So without further ado, let me introduce our moderator today, Anna Tansey. Anna is an IFS certified coach. She's also a co-leader of the upcoming online IFS Inspired Coaching webinar that is sponsored by the Center for Self-Leadership. And here's a bit of interesting information about Anna. She founded actually and led and hosted a summer youth program for 15 years now. So without further ado, please help me welcome Anna Tansey. Anna, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tufik. It is certainly a privilege to be with everyone today. I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to moderate this panel of some really intriguing people who I've had a chance to meet and get to know a little bit. Between the work that you referenced, Tufik, with young people and my own two children, one in high school and one in college, it's really daunting to look at what they navigate and the level of complexity that their lives have that we certainly didn't have at our age. So I so much appreciate the work that's being done out in Minneapolis. What I'd like to do is actually introduce Jody Nelson, who is not only a therapist, she is actually facilitating a pilot program of bringing IFS into the school systems and working with teachers and administrators. So Jody, I'd like to turn it over to you just to give us a little sense for what it is that you've been bringing to them, just a tidbit, and I know we'll hear a little bit more later in the webinar. If you could just give us a little bit about what is this that you're bringing to the school systems?
Sure, thanks, Anna. So just a real quick background of how I got into this. About 12 years ago, I was kind of out of gas in terms of my teaching and my therapy, and I thought I need to learn something, and so I got involved in IFS, and I went to level 1, and I felt some real personal transformation through that experience of beginning to understand how I show up in the world and how I'd like to show up in the world, and really feeling some compassion for myself and others. And that made such a difference in my life that I went on in training, level 2 and level 3, got pretty evangelical about the whole thing. And then just like many people who have the training in internal family systems, is we go back to wherever we came from and start to implement the model. It's systemic and it's relational, and so it's really you see parts and people who would benefit from understanding themselves a little better. And so I just took it to all the places I was involved. And for me, that's here in a community agency, Guadalupe Alternative Programs, where we have an alternative school, began to work with staff and kids here I am the department chair for the Marriage and Family Therapy program at Argosy, so I've got my hands on students and kind of forcing them to learn IFS. And then around the same time, a group of us created the Community School Collaborative and providing school-based mental health in 25 schools in the Twin Cities. So it was a lot about relationships, and then being able to bring this transformative model into schools and therapy at that intersection.
Thank you. Really helpful, Jody. Appreciate the contextual overview. I'd actually love to dive right into this and let this story unfold by beginning with Jennifer. Jennifer is a counselor in a middle school. And Jennifer, I'd love to have you tell folks a little bit about your background and the work you've been doing and what you see as you interact with the young people who counsel you, who you counsel and who walk into your office each and every day. Jennifer, what can you do to offer a little bit of insight into what you're seeing?
Well, I'd like to share a day in the life of a student in an urban middle school. I work in an urban middle school. I support students, wraparound services as far as collaborate with the school, their teachers, work with the families. But I'd like to give you a view inside these students. This is a composite, and it may seem like I am being extra, but I assure you that it's not exaggerated. This example, these are the kids that I work with.
Yep.
But okay, so I'm the youth right now. I lead different lives. Who I am outside of school needs to stay outside of school, outside of the classroom, for me to be successful. I need to be who I'm told to be. That communicates something to me. The student experience, what I say, how I experience things, is obscured and not privileged. I'm told more often than not what to think, how to feel in order to be good. School is my safe place, is an example. Not necessarily. What makes school unsafe? Am I even smart? Peer conflict. Am I going to get kicked out, suspended? To a lot of these kids, school can feel like prison with all the rules and the expectations. The school structure isn't necessarily a great fit culturally and sometimes developmentally. And school's not always set up for kids who face adversity. So a day in the life of a student at an urban middle school, 7 a.m. Alarm goes off. Am I gonna make the bus? I'm responsible to get the younger siblings ready and on their bus. Do I have clean clothes? Do they have clean clothes? Do we have anything to eat before school? If the bus is late or if I miss the bus, I won't get breakfast. 8 a.m. on the bus. We had to walk over shell casings from the shooting the night before to get to the bus stop. Someone made fun of my hair because it's nappy. I get my do-rag, outlawed by school admin, mind you, out of my pocket and put it on. I'm hungry, which makes me tired and crabby. My heart's beating fast and I'm trying to keep track of my siblings. Sitting on the bus is my moment to exhale. I have a headache from not eating and the other kids are being loud and I'm trying to join in with the group of kids and deflect attention from me when kids make fun of my hair so I'm not a target. I'm trying to manage my worry and fear about walking around with my hair out. Do-rags, hats are not allowed. Mom didn't have the money for me to get my hair done. I missed school the last 2 days. I stayed home because my little sister was sick and mom had to work. 9 a.m. The bus was late. So I had to go to the cafeteria to get my breakfast. The lunch lady seemed annoyed with me. I barely have time to eat because I need to be in advisory class. I won't even remember what I ate for breakfast because I shoved a third of it in my mouth and threw the rest away to get to advisory. My advisory teacher hates when I miss and I hate walking in late. So as I'm running to advisory, 3 different school staff call me out in front of everybody to stop running and to take the do-rag off my head so I can take pride in my appearance. I don't have pride in my appearance because I can't take proper care of that. I take the do-rag off and pull my hoodie up to hide my hair. As I'm walking into advisory, the dean pulls my hood off my head, and I have to walk into class with my hair. 10 a.m. I was supposed to bring in money for a planner. We don't have money for a planner. My mom doesn't want me to tell anybody because she's embarrassed. It's going to be Spirit Week next week, and we don't have the money for a school shirt. I don't even know if I'm going to have a good enough blue shirt for next week because I think my cousin took mine when he took my toothbrush. I feel hot and uncomfortable sitting here because I know the teacher's going to tell us to take out our planners. I don't have one, and she's going to ask why. They know why. Why do they put me through it? They give me one in the end anyway. 11 a.m. I like the teacher in my class. The teacher sees me. Everything out of his mouth isn't what not to do, something I didn't do or did wrong or what to do. I hear that all day, and it's nice to get a break. And there are a couple of kids that kind of can get what I'm going through. But we always get in trouble for talking. And I was warned that I'd get kicked out of class if I don't stop talking. I need to not get any calls to my mom, interrupting her at work and asking her to come to the school. She whoops my ass because she can lose her job. Then what would we do? And it'd be all my fault. 12 p.m., I get to be with my friends. They saved me a spot in line. Other kids get pissed, but I've seen them go ahead of me. So they've done it too. The food is good. The cafeteria lady doesn't like me, but doesn't get to single me out. It's good to have a warm meal. My buddy doesn't eat a lot of his lunch, but still takes everything so I can have seconds. 1 p.m., the teacher hands out homework. I'm not sure how I'm going to get it done. I have to make sure all my siblings get their homework done because mom will be at her other job. I feel like I understood it when my teacher explained it, but I have no clue how to do it once I get home. I'm the oldest, and I make sure that we all stay safe in the house. There were 4 shootings this weekend, so mom said we had to stay inside for now. It's hard to focus when I have so much to think about. I have to figure out what we're gonna eat for dinner if mom isn't bringing something when she gets home at 9. 4 p.m., I'm home and my siblings are begging to play outside. I have to keep telling them no. They get really annoying and won't do what I say. I wanna hit my sister because I just can't take her sometimes. 6 p.m., everyone is crabby from being hungry and stuck inside. I give them dry cereal to eat while we wait. Mom will bring food for us when she gets home at 9. I don't understand my homework. I understood it when the teacher explained it. I knew this was gonna happen because I don't understand it now and I don't even know where to start. I can't think with all the noise from my siblings, so I just put it away. 10 p.m., I'm worried about what I'm gonna wear tomorrow. I forgot to think about it earlier. I'm not sure if I have anything clean. I might have to wear the same outfit. We share a bed, but I can't sleep because we can't sleep in it. Mom's afraid of bullets coming through the window, so me and my siblings sleep on the floor. I don't like the way that I feel as I lay there to get to sleep, and I really hate my hair.
Thank you, Jen.
Well, you're welcome. And I just, like I said, that's a true composite. Everything in there is a lot of these kids go through on the regular. It's not as rare as one might think. And I just feel if everyone at the school was taught about IFS, the difference that it could make, it could give kids an overt permission to be who they are. And kids will have time during the school day where who they are is appropriate, and they can learn that who they are can include who the school tells them to be successful. And when they have a greater understanding of their own parts, it affords a greater understanding of one another. Mm-hmm. Conflict would not escalate as quickly or as high as often. And conflict on a lower level is more manageable for everyone. Mm-hmm. Yep. So bottom line, yeah, mm-hmm. I'm pro IFS in schools.
Mm-hmm. Got that. Jennifer, thank you. Appreciate the composite. It is, my parts get activated. I get truth bumps, and we have messages from people saying that it brought tears to their eyes and found that it was just sad and sobering. So thank you, just to understand through the eyes of a kid trying to navigate their day and go to and from school. Appreciate that. I'm going to turn to Tim. Tim is currently a 5th grade teacher in the Minneapolis school system, formerly in the middle school. So my understanding is you've just started with the 5th graders this fall. Tim, maybe you could give us a sense of a day in the life of the teachers who are working in the school systems there where you are.
Yes, thank you. So I kind of wanted to back up just a little bit and talk a little bit also about a composite structure in terms of the idea of what the teachers who are in this program with me, I'm sort of representative of the thinking that they bring to our trainings each month that we engage with Jody. And I wanted to start with a quote that I found from Dick Schwartz that was in a piece that he had written. And I wanted to kind of begin with that because I see this every time that I'm meeting with my colleagues. There's 2 little quotes that are from this piece that he wrote. He wrote, "With all the intense provocations to which we're subjected day in and day out, we need to find a way to keep ourselves firmly grounded and open-hearted. The lesson I've repeatedly learned over the years of practice is that we must learn to listen and ultimately embrace these unwelcome parts. If we can do that, rather than trying to exile them, they transform." Those words, he was writing about himself, but they have been what's guided my work and the work of my colleagues, in my opinion, over the last 9 months as we've engaged in this work. That's what we've seen happen, is that I've seen people working to transform their practice as practitioners in the area of education. We know that many of the same things that Jennifer was talking about, we're seeing with our students regularly. And I think the biggest thing that I would add to what she talked about, there's a lot of the things that I could have put names to, but the biggest thing that I see is the idea of motivation and growth mindset. That a lot of the work that we're doing is really to try to put in place that idea that if you do these things as a teacher, you're much more apt and able to bring a growth mindset to your classroom. And then what that does is really puts in place an additional level of support for kids, because if you can keep that mindset, if you can find that in yourself, then you're much more apt to be able to lend that energy and that self-energy to the people that you're working with every day. So that's, I think, the big piece that I see for the people I work with. But I do kind of want to also take you back to just why it was that I decided to do this work. Because what happened is we got invited to do this work, and there were 60 people in the room when we got invited. And a lot of us talked about, like, what is it that really would drive us to do this? So I'm just going to highlight 3 areas of growth that I wrote down before I started this process. I said that I wanted to understand trauma and its impact on students and student learning. I wanted to engage with feedback mechanisms that included affective connections. And then I also wanted to use my ability to analyze, because I see myself as an analyst and a person who engages in a high level of analysis every day to positively impact student achievement. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen come out of this from all of my colleagues, because I've worked with almost every person on a partner or a small group interaction over the last 9 months. And what I've seen from us as teachers is that that's what's happening, is that we see ourselves making those changes. And so I'm kind of the composite of the teachers that are in this program. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about how it has impacted me. So I wanted to make sure I was able to get this in the time that I was given. So pardon me as I read a couple of things. The changes in my classroom that I've been most connected to is the idea that resilience is something that I need to think about most often as I'm working with the kids that I teach. My classroom has become a collection of managers, firefighters, and exiles surrounded by themselves. I'm looking for exiles as I teach and planning my lessons based on the things that allow students to lead with self-energy. For example, one thing that I really connected to in our training was that a manager may be shown as risk-avoidant behavior, but I need my kids to take risks. And so if I need my kids to take risks on a regular basis, then I need to be being aware of that and really making that connection is a key. And that goes back to one of the things that really resonated with me in the beginning of this, and I feel it in the work that I do with the teachers who work with me every month when we get together and when I interact with them via email and everything, is that we can lend self-energy. And if we can lend self energy, we want to be able to do that. We want to be able to connect to that. And that's a huge change for me as a teacher. A change in my approach is that I pay more attention to intentionally promoting students' resilience. I pay attention to the things I can change. And I also focus on classroom leadership as opposed to classroom management. I'm always much more cognizant that I am the #1 protective factor for kids when they're with me. And then I need to think about that as a person who doesn't always have the opportunity to just say, oh, there's only one thing in front of me and I don't have to, I can put everything else aside. Just like Jennifer's, composite, teachers are in situations where they're constantly dealing with all those things every day, and being in a situation where we can bring ourselves back to that situation of thinking about self and then worrying about the other 3 parts of this model as we move into this has really been key. And then I'm going to bring a little piece in that we came into our training about halfway through. We were connected to a book called Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard, and it's written by the Heath brothers. And I want to just remind you that I am in the business of change. Every day that I'm working, I'm engaged in change. And so one of the things that I've really been working on is thinking about that, is this idea that comes out of this text, that if my daily interactions have been guided by the idea that I'm striving to make a switch, I need to think about the ride or the elephant and the path that I need to shape for the people I'm surrounded by. And one of the hard parts about that is that if I'm not able to look for altruism and I'm not able to find that is in evidence in my sight and in the teachers that I work with, then what I need to be able to do is put that into place. I'm also much more aware of the universality of students' experiences. What Jennifer talked about is universally shared across every student, even though every one of those aspects isn't necessarily part of every one of their days.
Yep, absolutely.
And one of the pieces that we really need to have in place as teachers is that understanding that we can make that impact and really be able to recognize the opportunity for us to see the ups and downs of the students that we serve.
Thank you.
That's been my biggest impact for myself when I think about this. I mean, there's so many things that have come into me through this training, but really it goes back to that idea of connecting to self-energy and connecting to the idea that if I've got it and if I can figure out how to positively be connected to that, that I can lend it to the students that I serve.
Tim, that was beautiful. Thank you. Really appreciate that synopsis. And I think I'll turn it over to Jody to see what else you might want to do to amplify what we've heard. And then I know we're going to get into some questions and moderate. I'll moderate through hearing different perspectives. What would you like to add at this point, Jody?
Well, just that I'm retiring right now. I'll make that announcement because my work here is done.
Check the box.
And it was just so lovely to hear from both Jennifer and Tim from those perspectives. I think Jen did just an amazing job of putting that composite together, and really, bringing home for all of us the, to encourage that curiosity, I think, for us in terms of, not what's wrong with this kid, but what's happened to this kid. And so I am so grateful for her and the work that she's doing at Northeast Middle School, or at that school, sorry. We weren't getting names there. And then Tim just, like any, teacher-student relationship, the more he gets excited, the more I get excited. And, Tim, your enthusiasm for your own growth and learning is infectious. And I think it's infectious collegially as well as with you and your students. So I feel very smart that I chose you for that project. Because I think, that's, these two and other people in these schools is what's going to make a difference in the lives of these kids. So I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jody. I'd like to pick up on some of the points that Tim made, and maybe I can ask Jennifer to expand a little bit. You were touching on this idea of what motivated you. What is it about this that's inspired you and the impact that it's having on you and your classroom? Jennifer, can you expand a little bit on what touched you about this that caused you to sign up for a year-long pilot with Jody and your colleagues?
Yes, because I'm a level 1 IFS therapist.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm very proud of that. I'm a lifelong learner. I always want to get better and be better and do better. And that feeds my spirit, especially when it's working with kids and families.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why I'm so excited about IFS and well, just to put it plainly, you can't learn about it and not have it affect you, like really affect you. How it affected me is it's different. I'm different. It gifts me with different lenses with which to be in this world. I'm a different daughter. I'm a different mother. I'm a different friend, therapist. It makes me better. It makes me a better human, actually, to have these different lenses. And I'm also very excited about having a way to build relationship that is more organic. And what I mean by that is relationship. Relationship is what is the biggest healing factor or tool that we have for youth with trauma. And a lot of times, school staff, teachers, with what time? I mean, they're jumping through all these different district hoops and requirements. Well, with what time am I supposed to be building this relationship that I know everything about, their home life, and that I know this, and it's overwhelming for them. But just in speaking the IFS language to one another, when we communicate, I have a part that is really stressing out by the quiz that we're having. I mean, just even breaking that down, using that common language, relationships are built organically, just with regular interactions throughout the day. I mean, you can't not know somebody and have a different, deeper experience with somebody when you talk parts.
Lovely.
Can I jump in there too?
Absolutely.
What I also wanted to add, that one of the pieces that I found really connected to me directly was that I was asked to write down, like, what did I think was a reason that I would engage in this? And one of the things I wrote down right away was that I know that students need more mental health support. Like, as I look across every interaction that I have throughout a day, I could make every one of those interactions better through a higher level of mental health support for the kids that I work with. And so it kind of came back to that really simple statement, which, and then once we got into the interaction of the beliefs around, the parts and self, and the idea that not just was the students being more resilient, but the staff members being more resilient, my team being more resilient, because the job that teachers do now is so stressful and so difficult in terms of some of the interactions that they have on a weekly or monthly basis, that I was really hard pressed to think, well, okay, so if I was more resilient, how could that hurt me? And if I was able to talk about myself in a way that said, this is where some of my resilience is wearing down, or if I could, as Jennifer said, that idea about, if I could name a part and be able to share that with a staff member who also understood that structure, how could that not help us get more, effective at the task?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And just to piggyback on that just a little bit, using the parts language, it allows people to be less defensive. And so conflict is resolved much more easily. And it's easier for grown-ups not to take things as personal, like a personal dig or a personal disrespect thing when we talk parts language. It's really
that makes sense. Yeah, really good point. Let's take it a step further. Bring us into the classroom. Maybe, Tim, this is back to you. How do you bring IFS with you each day when you're doing your work? Can you give us a sense of what it's like to sit in your 5th grade class?
Well, the majority of what the students see is me bringing the idea of the myself energy. So what I do a lot is I talk about the parts of me, but I'm not, to be honest, I'm not currently using parts language because the kids don't necessarily always, that doesn't really fit as well. What I do is I talk about it from the perspective of, you know, the myself, and then them as selves. So what is it that they, you know, so we've talked about what do you see as yourself? What do you know, what parts do you see that are positives? We talk about some positives, and the kids have brought it down. I left it as positives, but they really wanted to get into this idea of also bringing in this idea about negatives. Like, what are things that are negative? So then we named some of the things that we used a little bit of IFS language to bring that in. And then we named those pieces as we've gone through the kinds of discussions. Now I'm trying to meld this with work that we've done from Responsive Classroom. So our circle trainings, and we begin each day with a circle. So I pulled this work into our circle work that we do, but also into a program that we use. I think I can throw it out there. It's Second Step. We use Second Step as one of the programs that are used in our schools. And so I'm melding this into that work. And one of the pieces that's real successful with that is that the kids, now that I've begun to name these things, they've begun, in our Second Step program, there's a lot of videos. And so we watch a little video and then we'll do a reflection upon that work. Kids now have begun to name the parts of the characters that are doing the things that are in the videos. I found that to be just amazing, because that's the piece that then I see, kind of like what Jody was saying earlier, that's where I see them starting to take ownership for that. And my next step really is to be able to bring this in so that the students start to use it in their interpersonal interactions and start to be able to talk to each other regarding that. We needed to start at the group level, and now we're bringing it down sort of in a funnel down to where the kids would use it more in a one-on-one or a small group interaction. Because as you can imagine, you know, we do have some interactions that are not always positive in our classrooms. And what we need to do is to figure out ways to have kids interact around those things. And my plan is to bring this idea, the structure of the IFS language around managers, firefighters, and exiles, to be able to have the kids name those pieces as we go through the year.
Oh, yeah, that's great. So a couple of things are coming up here. One is that I'm hearing you able to integrate IFS with Responsible Classroom and Second Step, so it doesn't feel like it's this thing over there. It has an integrated feeling. I think that's important to have that sense of coherence. I'm also curious, when you talk about those negative parts, do you mean parts that are more burdened? Is that really where you're getting when you talk about that? When you talk about the positive and the negative?
Yes, that's what the kids are bringing to that conversation.
Okay, interesting, great. I want to just see, Jennifer or Jody, do either of you want to jump in on what we've talked about here so far before we move into another line of questioning? Good, okay. And for those who are listening today, we're excited to have you with us. We will, in fact, be inviting you to have questions, comments, if you want to explore things. So if you have curiosities, you may notice that there's a chat panel on the side of your screen, or if not, you can create one. You can open it up, and you are welcome to toss out questions in the next few minutes. I will continue to chat, and then over time, it'll be great for you to infuse some of the questions you have so that we can read that in before we wrap up. I feel there's a part of me that just wants to kind of go wide angle. We've been in the classroom. I feel like I want to come back out to Jody. I'd love to hear a little bit about what were you trying to accomplish? What was your overarching goal and objectives when you went in to do this pilot in Minneapolis?
Yeah, so let me say a little bit more about that. I know we wanted to certainly privilege the teacher and the student story here, which I think we've done a great job of. So, well, it's a little over a year now. I was, and I can't remember who approached who, but I was working with the Foundation for Self-Leadership with Mark Milton and Vicki McCoy and Feek on how do we, how might we bring this in a way into the schools that we could, pay attention to what might be an effective way to do that. So we created this project that began last fall in 2017 made the decision to choose 2 middle schools in Minneapolis, one in North Minneapolis, one in South Minneapolis, very high poverty schools, very urban, very great demographics. And I just thought that middle school teachers are, you know, they I think have a foot in being a kid and a foot in being an adult. And I just thought that that would be a fun group of teachers to bring this to. So we did, last fall I did an introduction to internal family systems for all of the staff and teachers at both of those schools, invited them to apply to be a part of this pilot program. We chose 8 from Northeast Middle School, or I keep saying the school, which we're gonna do, yeah, 8 from the South School, and away we went. So we started last January. The design is to meet one Saturday afternoon a month, and so we've met, of course, across this 8-9 month period. Wanted to, you know, have these relationships and teaching go over a period of time. And then like the full dose will be about 40 hours worth of training. And yeah, so we have one more session in October, and I don't know quite how we're going to be done. I think we'll probably have to figure out part 2, I'm not sure. But we have my partner Jennifer Ramji and I, and then my husband, actually Jim Nelson, did a couple of sessions as well, have introduced not only internal family systems, but also some concepts about trauma and attachment and resilience and other kinds of things that you can hear Tim mentioning as well. That, you know, the challenge is, you know, bringing in a psychotherapy model, you know, where you're used to teaching that to people who have a mental health background, but how do we make that relevant to people who have an education background, and what's going to be useful to them? So certainly have done much of the unblending work, and then wanting to set it in some mental health and other kinds of concepts. So I think that's gone well. We have an external evaluator, Jennifer Griffin-Wiesner, who's doing some qualitative work. She's done some focus groups. The teachers have done some journaling. We have more to do with that. And they are really, the teachers are our co-collaborators on this project. And I'm really eager to find out, you know, what did they think about meeting on Saturdays? What do they think about 40 hours? What did they think all these topics were helpful? What more could we have gone further into? And with the idea being that we want to see this be a model that could be replicated and scaled up. And so I'm excited to see what we're going to end up with. These guys were very courageous in going for this thing, and it's just been really a highlight of my work to do that with them.
It sounds like it. I can tell the 3 of you are kind of oozing with this enthusiasm. So it's lovely to hear you all speak from your perspectives. And there are a couple of questions coming in. You have a little whisper of, what's next and what'll the year look like after this. Do you have any foresight about what you might do as the next phase, Jody, or is it too early to tell as you collaborate and co-construct with these folks?
Well, you know, I think that we will have a curriculum. We will have, you know, throw this out, put more of this in. So we'll have this ready. You know, of course, because you're a part of this with the Connecticut folks and others, we're going to be sharing some of this at the Internal Family Systems National Conference in November. That we're not the only ones doing this work in schools, so it's really exciting to, you know, think that we're going to hopefully build a community of people who really see the use of IFS in this environment. I have in mind, well, one of the teachers said at our last group meeting that this felt like a morning meeting for teachers. Mm-hmm. And that kind of has been our thought was if we can resource the adults in the building, mm-hmm. then good things are going to happen for kids. Mm-hmm. And so I have some ideas about how do we continue a morning meeting, some sort of a support for this group of teachers and then other teachers who want to continue to deepen in the model, who want to continue to show up and lend their self-energy to kids and families and their colleagues. So I think we definitely are going to need to figure out an extension.
Yeah. And yet obviously you started with the adults in the system. We're helping them to be the ones that get the model, grasp it, bring it to the classroom and their interactions with the students and the others in the systems every day. And I'm glad you mentioned the conference. I do hope folks will consider joining our pre-conference on November 8th at the IFS conference in Rhode Island, because we are excited about a think tank. There's many of us trying different things. We're at different phases of trying to bring the IFS to the school system. So those of you who are interested, or if you don't know about it, certainly go on the CSL, Center for Self-Leadership website, because we're excited and would love to have other enthusiasts come join us to share the ideas or things they've tried in terms of IFS at any level, K through 12, college and adults. We've got all those things covered in our pre-conference. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to continue to encourage folks to submit questions if they have them. One of the questions that we have, one person just was curious, how did you get buy-in from teachers? How did you get them to want to kind of jump into this whole, delivery and implementation? And I know we got a whisper of it just hearing Tim and Jen. I wonder what else you would add, or that Tim and Jennifer might offer.
I'm going to recommend that Tim answers that.
Okay. Wait just a minute, Tim. You're on mute. Tim, wait just a minute. There we go.
I think for me, it was the first thing was that when we were given the initial presentation, it was at a time in our school year. So it was earlier in the school year when you really think about yourself as a teacher, as a problem solver. And so the timing was good, because it was like, Jody came in and talked to us and said, look, I'm going to, give you tools to think about this. I'm going to give you a multiplicity of perspectives that you're going to be able to bring into your work. And that was one thing that really resonated with me. I mean, it also looked like we were going to have fun. I mean, as much as some of this is really rooted in really deep, deep, important work, but also it's kind of fun when you get a chance to do some of the activities that we've done, to learn about how, a therapist's perspective changes and the moves that they make. And so people were intrigued by that. And I think the last piece too was that it's because we had school-based therapists in our schools. And the fact that I have a personal relationship with our school-based therapist, and that person was working with kids that I taught. And so most of the people that are in the program had that same interaction. At some point, we knew where that person was. They were in our school. They had a connection to us directly. We knew they couldn't discuss anything that was happening with the student, but we knew that they were working with the student,
right.
and that we knew that they were working on the same things that we were working on, and that we all wanted the same outcome. And we also knew that in order to have that interaction, the families would be supportive, because the families had signed off in order to have that, time given to the student during the class, during the school day. And so those were things that all kind of came together. We really felt like, because that happened, then the people that from my school who all, jumped on board and said, we're going to do this work, that was a big part of it. Was we felt like it was a team effort, and that we wanted to understand better how to support the team.
It sounds like it's a very collaborative team effort, and that there's a lot of alignment, that no matter where you are and the role you play in that system, we're all aligned on what we're trying to do here, even though I don't know exactly what you're doing in the classroom, or Tim doesn't know exactly what the school-based counselor is doing yet. We're all towards one goal, and I think that's part of what you're reflecting in that. And every time...
Can I jump in quick with
please, yes, go for it.
One line, because I wrote this down because it really had impacted me as I do some journaling after I go to the trainings. And I wrote down that the goal in teaching is the same as the goal as we've discussed for IFS: become more self-led and to have internal harmony among parts. That's really what we want when we're teaching.
Nice.
And so that's been sticking with me. I'm thinking it's a poster. I'm not sure.
Well, it's beautiful. You want for the external environment what you're creating on your internal environment. And it's all three of you have this beautiful smile that when you talk about the fun you have, it's very clear that there's a sense of rewarding accomplishment and that you've enjoyed the process. It hasn't been grueling. It's actually been kind of fun, which is a win-win all the way around there. So it's wonderful. Again, Jody and Jennifer, anything on that? I don't want to preclude any other PSs or comments you want to add on.
I just want to point out the power of self-energy, and and leading with self, and helping students or help de-escalating situations and students' reactivity by co-regulating through lending yourself energy. I mean, it's very powerful, and I'm a big believer. Powerful tool.
Yeah, great. Well, we know that self-energy begets self-energy. So when you show up that way, it invites that from other people, and that's a real powerful connection. I'm going to take it a step further and inquire a little bit about, what about teacher to teacher, teacher to administrator, different adult relationships? How is it impacting that? Especially, I guess, kind of an ancillary question is for those folks around you who haven't been in this training with you. So they know some of you are deeply immersed in the work and others are going about their day, certainly supportive, perhaps. I'm just curious if you can speak to that whole realm of this process. Anybody who wants to get us started? I don't know who has a thought on that one.
Well, I'll take a quick stab at that. Most of the colleagues that I currently work with have no understanding of this because I, due to budget cuts, had to switch schools this past year. And what I found is that when I talk about this, like just before I came down here for the webinar, I was talking to a colleague of mine who is a teacher who used to be a social worker. And we had this conversation. It was a 2-minute conversation, and I brought in a couple of these key points, and his reaction was like, oh my gosh, I want to have more conversation about that. I want to know more about what you're talking about bringing in, because as long as, and these were kind of his, pretty much paraphrasing his words were, as long as it's good for kids, and as long as you're not coming in saying you're an expert on anything, that you're just coming in with a lens of, I'm a learner and I'm continuing to grow in this area because I know that this is going to help the students that I serve, then they jump on right away and say, okay, well, tell me more. Let's talk about this. And so I have to figure out, obviously, how to bring that in a, professional and collegial manner. But that's something that, as long as they invite that, once we start having the conversations, I feel like it's a positive.
Yeah, if they open the door, and I would love you to stay with that, as well as Jennifer and Jody. When someone says, so what is this IFS thing? What do you mean by self-energy? What's your way of, the elevator conversation? How do you walk the hallway and try to give them a taste of it because you know the depth of what it can be? Anybody, again, I'm just curious, how do you respond when a colleague says, so what is this thing? I've heard a little bit about it. Jody, you got something to say.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but as Tim's talking, I don't know, this isn't exactly what you're asking for, Anna, but then I'm thinking, okay, Tim, we're going to have to go into that new school you're at, because now, and I'll just say too, over the course of this 9 or 10 months with these teachers, I hadn't anticipated things like the budget cuts, and I think three of the participants found out in the spring that they had lost that job and then went through the process of going to a new job. So talk about opportunities for parts to be stirred up, and so we were able to, to some degree support and take a look at that. The Parkland shooting occurred during the time that this group of teachers were in training. I just want to share, just to get this out here too, that when I asked that group of teachers, and how do you feel about this Parkland shooting, and just about to a person, they shared that they felt numb, or that they didn't have many thoughts about that. So that, I've talked about that with Tufik and others about, the importance of self and self-energy in these places that are hard places for people to stay human, as Jennifer said. So anyway, as I hear Tim talk about now being in a new school, it is that sort of virus, or now he's a bacteria that can go
go out and infect.
And so the virus spreading out.
How to support that is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, stay with that. There is a couple of inquiries about the assumption that maybe people who are patched in today don't have a comfort or a working knowledge of what we mean by self and self-energy and parts. Can you give just a little bit of an overview for someone who maybe is not familiar with the terminology or hasn't been exposed to any of the training?
You want me to do that?
If you wouldn't mind, I think just in case there's folks who are just not clear about what those terms mean.
Right. So just real quick, and again, and this is first came out of psychotherapy. Dr. Richard Schwartz came up with or started to develop this model over 30 years ago, and it's a way to view yourself internally in terms of how you're made up, and kind of focuses on some an appreciation of how we all have younger wounded parts, and then how our system has developed ways to protect ourselves so that we can survive. And so that it's a little bit of vulnerability and protection, and how to appreciate that. And then I was attracted to the model early on because it has a sort of a spiritual dimension, and that there's a belief that we have a self or a core or a center, and that I always feel like mental health is, when you're too ramped up, can you bring yourself down a little bit? And when you're too far down, can you bring yourself up? And can you find your center? And where you're in that flow. And so those are, I think, kind of and the other part that I was attracted to the model is all parts are welcome.
Yeah.
And none of your parts are bad. And so Jen and I and Tim, certainly, we work with all kinds of kids that are told that they're bad and that parts of them are bad and they need to get rid of this part of themselves. And so that was good news to me.
Yeah.
That we've got a center, that we've got a core, because I feel that, and I want to invest in that in myself, and that parts aren't bad. They get in extreme roles for a good reason, and that we can get to know those parts of ourselves, and like Tim said earlier, and be in greater inner harmony, and then bring that to the world. So. So that's my quick understanding. That's what I say it is.
That's very helpful. Thank you for that, Jody. I'm mindful that we're rounding the bend. And despite this very deep psychospiritual model that you have been trained in and been using for many years, and that Richard Schwartz has had, developed many decades now, it doesn't sound like there's a translation issue. I'm thinking about teachers and others just taking this and being able to. It sounds like you've translated into lay people's terms in a way that they could consume it without the depth or background of psychotherapy degrees and that sort of thing. Have you had any tripping points around that? I'm just curious if you could speak to that.
Well, what I have shared with Tufik and others, my experience in training teachers now in this model is that I think they get it quicker than therapists in training got it. In my experience, and me personally. So I think as, I was in my mid 50s and had learned some other things, and so I definitely had an unlearning part that I had to do. But teacher, they swim in this quick, and I think they're in rooms with kids with all kinds of parts, and so I think being able to. Jen had spoken earlier about a shared language, so I think when we're able to language, and I think Dick's language has been, certainly useful to me in understanding human interaction and understanding myself and how I show up. That group of teachers just took to it very quickly. And so that was a great learning on my part.
Great, thank you for that. I don't know, in a couple of minutes, I know Tufik will begin to wrap this up. I'm wondering, what other key insights or lessons have you learned, or maybe barriers that you've hit that we haven't touched on? What would be useful just for maybe each one of you can just give us a couple of final thoughts, words of wisdom as we begin to wrap up. We can start with whomever. What's been the toughest part or the most rewarding, or things to keep in mind if other people are trying to embark on this? Anyone have any initial thoughts?
Well, I found personally, to go back to the all parts are welcome, that every part has a positive intent. Whether or not it's manifesting that way is another story. But if you're curious about why and where that's coming from, it is impactful as far as self-talk and the thoughts that we have and the interjects that we give power to. It is a tool. The language, the theory, the model is a tool to understand yourself as well as other people, and actually it offers a way that is kind of like a recipe and not too woo-woo and tricky, but a recipe to how to learn to accept and love yourself and all your parts. And
Lovely.
it's really very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. It's so well said. Tim, Jody, just thoughts or comments on this as we begin to head towards the top of the hour. Tim?
I think that the thing that I'm still really working through and trying to connect to the model is something that came up about midway, just past midway in our work, and that is a statement that came in that said, resistance is sometimes a lack of clarity. And how impactful that has been for me in terms of little steps that I've needed to take, like little pieces, but I need to keep coming back to that. And that's really a piece that I see as a big challenge in the work that I'm doing. Because like Jody said, we kind of feel like, okay, we're going to meet one more time, but there's so much more we need to know. And so we're going to be sitting in that room at the end of that last day, and we're not going to feel like we're done. And so it's little things like that where I've written those things down and thought about those things and talk about them with my colleagues. So we need to kind of figure out what our next steps are for ourselves, because that's something that it feels a little uncomfortable that we're going to be done. Because I don't feel like I'm necessarily ready to just say, oh, okay, I'm good. So that's the part that I'm kind of dealing with in terms of the work.
That makes sense. Another frame for resistance in my work is it's somewhere between denial and acceptance. So they've actually moved a little bit. So I like to look at it as they're not over there and they've got their finger around, but they're not quite carrying the torch. So I sometimes see it as moving the needle. So that's just a different way of looking at the work I do when it comes to change. Jody, what final thoughts do you have before 2 Feet wraps it up?
I would just, if there's anyone in the audience that is considering doing this with teachers or bringing into schools, or if there are teachers or schools out there that are interested in embracing this model, I just really would love for people to go forward with that intent. Schools are such important places and need and deserve so much of our support and help. And they are complicated places. When we started with these 16 folks, like I said, 3 moved jobs, 1 left teaching entirely and works in the funeral industry. Another, went up into the district to do another job. I mean, no one is staying, the parts are talk about parts and movable parts. You have to be so flexible. And so anyway, I just really want to encourage people to consider embracing teachers in this way.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you for the wonderful work you're doing and all of you are doing. I want to give you a standing ovation because it's just really exciting to bring this to school systems, and I think about the power and potential of what you're up to. So I really do appreciate that, and just piggybacking on that, I'll turn it back over to Feek. Just want to remind people a website. It's Center for Self-Leadership
and foundationifs.org for the foundation.
Okay, thank you. So if people are interested in joining us on the 8th of November, we'd love to have you with your ideas or things you've tried. And it's been a privilege being with all 3 of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Tim, Jennifer, and Jody for a very engaging conversation. And thank you all for participating. We will come back with another forum on taking self to school. We intend to invite a school principal, a parent, and an adolescent psychotherapist to this next conversation. In the interim, let's please stay connected. There's a school in every neighborhood. We each know a student or a teacher or a principal at a given school, be that a child, a grandchild, a nephew, a niece, a neighbor. I urge us all to knock on our school's doors and start the conversation about how IFS could be of value. Certainly, the foundation will continue its work to replicate what we've done in Minneapolis in some other areas. We thank Jody and her team for what you've done to date, and we hope to take that effort to the next level. Thank you again for participating. Please stay engaged. Please stay tuned.